Alright, so Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Let's continue with our discussion on chapter 9, which is the basic research methodology, with topic number 5, which is observational research. Now, this is not a difficult concept to understand, because what it means is just a research that is conducted based on observation. Okay, it is also known as a field research, where its primary goal is to record observational activity without any interference, without any unobtrusive observation. Right, okay, they would observe the subjects in their natural behavior. So since this is a social science research, we would observe the behavior of humans. So I will not be using examples of any scientific research where we observe animals. We'll try our best to look at examples using humans. Right, so the following information that we have here is a table of information about the different types of data recording in observational research. So we have 4 here. Number 1, duration recording. So we will record the length of time of behavior. Let's say, for example, we are observing the behavior of a homeless person, so we record the length of time. Frequency recording, we record the frequency of time that behavior occur. The frequency of a homeless person to scratch his head. Maybe, I don't know. Okay, this is just an example. Right? The interval. Right? The interval recording is we observe a subject for a fixed duration of time. For example, okay, from 9 a.m. until 12 p.m. how many times does that homeless person scratch his head? By the way, I hope this is not an offensive example. This is just merely of an example for me to explain all this. And then number 4, we have a continuous recording, where we record everything that happened. Right, so the following note says on the types of observational research. So your book mentioned about that there are 3 ways that an observational research can be conducted, and they are naturalistic observation, control observation, and participant observation. Again, this is not that complex to understand. Naturalistic observation is where you record your observation in the participants or the subject's own natural environment. Right? Say, for example, we observe the homeless person. So we will observe the homeless person in their natural environment. Where would their natural environment be? Maybe in the street somewhere. Right? So, okay, what are the advantages of having a naturalistic observation? It has a high ecological validity because you are in their natural environment, right? And then it can be used to generate research ideas and validate findings from experimental findings. Okay, for this, because you are in their natural environment, there are lots of other extraneous or other variables which are not your independent variables, and those other variables can be new research ideas. And then it says here, sometimes it is the only ethical and practical method. So if you are observing a homeless person in their natural environment, you are not taking him away from his home, even though he's homeless basically, what I mean here is that you are not putting that person in a laboratory where you would spoil his mood, for example. And also, I think grabbing a person and put them in a lab would be very unethical. Now let's look at the disadvantages. The first disadvantage that is mentioned in the book is that the point that you cannot infer the cause and effect. The cause and effect here, I think, refers to the independent variable. Say, for example, you want to observe the aggressive behavior of a homeless person, right? Because it's in a natural environment, there's so many determining factors that can cause that person to be aggressive, and because we have a lot of extraneous variable, it's difficult for us to infer the cause and effect. Okay, this is different from having that person to be in a lab where you can control or manipulate the variables, right? Which is also the explanation for the lack of control. You don't have the control over the variables, or you cannot manipulate that variable as much. Okay, the third point is that it is difficult to be replicated, because you're not controlling the variable, and then because it's based on the factors that they are in their natural environment, it's difficult to replicate. And then it might also lead to some ethical problems, because you are invading the privacy of that person. You are observing that person. It's like you are stalking that person. So you might invade the privacy of the person. Right. The second type of observational research is a controlled observation. Right. We are now recording or observing the behavior of a person spontaneously, but under conditions contrived by the researcher, under conditions manipulated by the researcher. For example, in a lab. So you put the homeless person in a lab. Okay, so the advantage of having to use I think this is a mistake here. It should be lab control observation. The advantage is you will have more control over the environment. Okay, so when you have more control over the environment, or more control, to be precise here, in an experiment, when you control or manipulate over the variables, you have a more accurate observation. It is easy to replicate because you have control over everything. You put that person in a lab, you can replicate the same experiment with another person. Right? It is also ethical. Okay, it is also can also be ethical. It can be ethical if you have the permission of the participant. Okay, it says here it is ethical unless observers are hidden. So if you put the homeless person in a lab and then that person don't know what is happening, then it becomes unethical. It becomes like a crazy science experiment. Now, let's look at the disadvantages of a control observation. Now, one of the disadvantages would be the participant reactivity. So this means that if the participants are aware that they are being observed, okay, the participants might react in a way differently. So when that happens, it may distort the data. Okay, say for example, if you are aware that someone is watching you, you would probably behave differently. And then because you have that person in a lab, in a control observation, there will be a lower ecological validity because that person is not in their own natural environment. right? Homeless persons are used to, maybe, not trying to be offensive here, just putting things as an example. Maybe a homeless person would be not that awkward in a place where, like, for example, in a street. But when you put that person in a very clean environment, like, for example, in a lab, the behavior would be different. Right, the third and final type will be the participant observation. Now, this is like a creepy researcher, because now the researcher becomes involved in the everyday life of the subjects. Okay, so using the same example of observing the homeless person, the researcher will also become homeless to blend in together with the homeless person. So the advantages of having a participant observation, okay, for that, it can be either with or without the knowledge of the subjects. So one of the advantages would be it has a very high ecological validity, because you are in the participant's natural environment, and it will be extremely detailed and in-depth data, because you are in the natural setting of the participant and you blend in. Okay, if it is without the knowledge of the participant, then they would not have noticed that you are observing them. The disadvantage of a participant observation would be it's difficult to record the data promptly and objectively, because you, in that sense, you became a homeless person yourself to observe homeless people. Right? When would be the time for you to record the data in your book? Right? If you open a book and you start writing something, people might notice you. So that's why it's difficult to do all this. Right? And then the observer's behavior may influence the participants. If you're too close with the subjects and they know that you are observing them, then you may influence their behavior, even if they don't know that you are observing them, because you are a person who is new to them. Okay, they might feel awkward with you having near to them. Alright, there might be an ethical issues of deception. This happens if you are an observer, a participant observer without their knowledge, right? And then you are deceiving them, right? Okay, I think that is all for observation.